Vermont, June 22nd, Brooklyn Road north to Route 140. I dropped Dave off on Route 140 and he is heading south. I am driving around the mountain to Brooklyn Road. It is a very long drive around the mountain and then up the mountain to Brooklyn Road, where I parked in the Big Branch ATLT parking lot. This is a new parking lot for the Appalachian Trail and the Long Trail. I had to walk about 0.5 of a mile on this dirt road to reach the trail. The trail here was very muddy, with some areas with water on the trail. Some hikers I had met had told me that it had rained every day so far here in Vermont this week, and yesterday Hurricane Bill had moved through this area. I was surrounded by black flies, and they were biting me all over my legs. This is the first time that I was hiking in about a month after being diagnosed with plantar fasciitis. I reached Little Rock Pond Shelter, a cabin-style shelter with an open front and a porch. It was in a beautiful area around Little Rock Pond. The trail walked along the side of Little Rock Pond. The pond had flooded the trail, and the rocks were very slippery. The trail then went into the woods with lots of mud on the trail, and the trail was a little grown in with brush. It was difficult hiking on the trail, and when I met up with Dave, he had told me that he had slipped off of a rock and landed in the mud. Dave told me that the bridge over the river was out and that he had to climb over a down tree and bushwhack through the woods to get to the other side of the trail. We sat on a log here and had our lunch. We noticed that one of our water bottles was missing from his pack. It must have fallen out of the side of the pack when he fell. We split up again, and we had headed back thirsty. I found his water bottle on the ground, later on the trail in the mud. I saw the mud and the rock that he had slipped on. I passed through a nice pine area before I reached White Rocks again. We had climbed up to here in August of 2007. It was a humid day today, and the sun had come out around noon, making it even more humid. I decided to take the Keewaydin Trail back out to the road so I do not have to get across the river. We had two-way radios with us on this trip. However, due to the terrain here, we had little reception. Even our cell phones had poor reception. Dave was able to call me on the phone here, and he said that he was back at the truck and heading over to pick me up. I am happy to finish this section of the trail. Dave tells me that I focus too much on finishing pieces of the trail, but we are so close to completing the Vermont section of the AT. I had loved the farmlands and the mountains of Vermont. However, I did not enjoy the hordes of bugs, the humidity, and the mud. June 23rd, Bartlett Road north to south, Route 12. We are staying at Coolidge State Park, and we woke up to rain, which is not supposed to end until around 3 o'clock. I had planned for a backpacking trip, but we had broken this section down to 8 miles on one day and 4 miles on the next day. We will be in the camper in between our hikes. At around 9 o'clock, the rain had let up some, and we decided to head to the trail. We arrived at Pomfret Road with little parking and found out that we needed to cross a stream which was flooded. So we moved the camper to the other side of the stream on Bartlett Brook Road, a dirt road, and found a nice abandoned farmhouse here with an old barn that was grown in with brush. I had dropped off Dave here, and he will be heading south to Route 12. I arrived at the trailhead off of Route 12. This section of the trail was like going through a torture chamber, with the extreme heat and humidity, with the sounds of thunderstorms nearby. The sky was very hazy, with the sun beating on it, and you felt like you were inside a greenhouse. I was wearing rain pants, the vinyl type, that felt like one of those sauna pants that is used for losing weight. I am not wearing anything under the rain pants, so I can not take them off. I had never felt so hot like this before. It was pure misery, hiking in these woods. No views, just the endless thick woods with wet trees as I climbed up a steep hill. Then I went down, and then back up and down and so forth. Each climb and descent was about a 500-foot gain and descent, pointless ups and downs. I went through a couple of tall grassy fields up to my hips that you had to hold up your arms and wade through. You know how much I hate this, and the sun beating down on you just made it even worse. I reached a couple of nice views from the fields of the farmland and the mountains. However, the sky was so hazy that the views were just a blur. I reached a hill where I had found the remains of a crashed airplane. Only a small plain cockpit roof was sticking out of the ground. I had seen a lot of wild flowers on this section and not as much mud as we have had on the trail yesterday. I met up with Dave and I thought the black flies were fairly bad. However, Dave did not seem to be bothered by them. He was, of course, listening to his MP3 player during his hike. We ate our lunch and split up again. I reached Stage Road, which had a nice parking area next to a stream with a footbridge over it. I reached another field and then more climbs. It is so hot out here now, and I am out of water. I descended again, and I saw the field with the abandoned house. Yes, I am almost out. I made it, and it was a really hard hike. I could hear thunder in the distance, and we still have to go to the stream crossing near Pomfret Road. Dave had been out about an hour before I had reached the camper. We crossed the road, and we went up a hill in the field, and then down into the woods, before we reached the stream that was near Pomfret Road. The stream was high, with lots of rocks and boulders in it. A thin wire cable was attached to 2 trees across a fast-moving stream that was about knee-high. It is strange that the other stream crossing that we crossed had a nice footbridge, and here there is only a small wire cable to help you cross the fast-moving stream. I wrote a note in the sand that said, "Where is the bridge?" June 24th. Pomfret Road south to Queechee West Hartford Road. We camped in the AT parking lot off of Stage Road that I said was a nice parking area next to a stream. I had never noticed until last night that the stream sounded like people talking. I dropped Dave off on Queechee West Hartford Road and I drove over to Pomfret Road where we were yesterday. I will be heading south on the trail today. It was difficult getting onto the trail with all the traffic, which makes me nervous when I have to find the parking for the trail and then have to run across the road to get onto the trail. The morning was cool out. However, I do not know how long it will last before the weather gets hot and muggy again. I walked a short distance on the trail before I came out to a tall, grassy field again, which is where the black flies are most active, and it was hot as I walked in the open field with the sun beating down on me. I reached the top of a mountain at Little Knob Vista, which overlooked the Saskadena 6 ski slopes. I walked on a wide path with a stone wall and saw a porcupine. One appeared to be dead, and another one was crossing the trail in front of me. I reached a sign with an AT symbol on it and the words, "When in doubt, the AT always goes up." There were many PUDs here, and I reached another top with a nice view and a little breeze. There was some raspberry bushes here, however, it was too early for raspberries. I did find 2 wild strawberries that were very delicious. As I was walking through an area thick with little trees, I saw a baby bird sitting on the side of the trail. As I was walking past it, the mother bird, a grouse, had exploded out of the woods and was chasing me down the trail. I reached Cloudland Road, a dirt road, a paper sign attached to a tree point to the Cloudland farm for hikers to go to for some fresh farm food. I reached Thistle Shelter, where Dave was waiting for me. We sat inside the shelter and had our lunch. I reached a grassy field top about an hour after leaving Dave and then descended down into a pine forest. I cannot believe it, but I had another encounter with a grouse before I reached Cloudland Shelter. It was a nice day with lots of sunshine and not much mud as other sections of Vermont. June 25th, Mad Tom Notch Road north to Griffin Lake Campground. We drove to Danby Landgrove Road, a forest dirt road where I had dropped Dave off, and we are splitting up to backpack to Griffin Lake Campground, where we will meet to set up camp. I had to drive 17 miles on dirt roads and another 4 mile on the Mad Tom Notch Road, where the AT parking lot is. I started off with my backpack at around noon to the top of Stiles Peak. It had a nice view, and I ate my lunch up here. Dave had reached me on our cell phones, and he told me that he had already passed the first 2 shelters. It was a nice day for this backpack trip as I climbed up to Peru Peak, which was a much harder climb than Stiles Peak was. I reached the Alpine Zone, the smell of pine, which is always spectacular when you reach this area, and you feel that the hard climb was worth it when you finally get here. The top of Peru Peak had no views, and I continued on to Peru Peak Shelter and had saw a large garter snake on the trail. I reached Peru Peak Shelter, which had a nice stream next to it. I reached Griffin Lake Campground, And Dave was already here and had already set up the tent. A large youth group was here and had taken up all of the other tent platforms. Luckily, one was still open for us when Dave had arrived, and the group were a little bit loud. We cooked our homemade dehydrated meal. The hot ground turkey with homemade tomato sauce was really good. It was kind of cool at dusk when the youth leaders were leading the youth group in a religious song before they sat down to eat. It had just started to rain, and the campsite became quiet. June 26th, Griffin Lake Campground, north to Danby Landgrove Road. We woke up to rain and a wet tent, but luckily the sun had come out. We packed down, and I continued heading north to Danby Landgrove Road, and Dave headed south to Mad Tom Notch Road. I reached Baker Peak Vista that had the best view of the surrounding mountain on this section of the trail. I passed Lost Pond Shelter and reached Big Branch Shelter. Both were near a stream. I'm only about a mile from where Dave is going to pick me up. It was a good backpacking trip. The trail had some mud, but was mostly good. We were lucky to have 2 good days of hiking with very little bugs. June 27th, Stratton Arlington Road North, a stealth site pass, Stratton Pond Shelter. We are backpacking together to do a section that we had tried to hike in August 2014, to where we had ran out of time and was not able to make it to a river crossing in the Lye Brook Wilderness. It was a long section, and rain was forecasted for tonight. We hiked the AT from Stratton Arlington Road to U.S. Forest Road 341. We reached the Forest Road and headed to the second AT junction and continued to Stratton Shelter. It is a bummer that we have to hike the same section of a trail that we had already done. We reached the shelter, and I had read the shelter logbook and had read the page when we were here before as we ate our lunch here. It was a shame that we could not make our destination because we had run out of time that day. The pond section of the trail was still closed, and we were back on the rerouted section of the trail. We had reached the area that we had turned around at last year. This time we did reach Winhall River Crossing that had a nice bridge over it, where we were supposed to have reached last year. We had kept seeing the hiker that we had met in New York. He was heading southbound on the trail. I was already getting tired, and my plantar fasciitis started to really hurt. We had to stop, and I had to take 1 Aleve and 2 Bayer Extra Strength aspirin. We reached the sign that we had reached in October 2008, and the old large metal wheel with the words, "The Long Trail," which was painted on it with a white arrow. There is a nice stealth site here, and we are camping here. We set up our tent and put the tarp over the tent for incoming rain tonight. I had fallen asleep and had slept soundly with the rain sounds falling on the tent. Yeah, too bad it never stopped. June 28th, stealth site past Stratton Pond Shelter south to Stratton Arlington Road. We were unprepared for the severity of this storm. We woke up to a torrential rain downpour and strong winds. The air was very cold, and it looked like a hurricane out there. Dave had set up a tarp between some trees for me to take cover as he packed down for our hike back to our truck in the most awfulest weather that we had ever had on this trail. The trail was flooded, and even my new waterproof boots was not able to keep my feet dry. It was extremely cold for the month of June, and I was shivering during our 4.4-mile hike to Stratton Shelter. We took shelter here, and then took the 3.9-mile Stratton Pond Trail back down to Stratton Arlington Road and another 0.5-mile to our truck. We still have to hike up to Stratton Mountain to finish Vermont. However, I do not think that we will be doing it on this trip. All of our clothing are soaked, and the weather for our last day is heavy rain.